Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining us today. It's June 10th, 2020. We're going to have an important discussion here today. My name is Rick Parkhill. I'm the Director of Brand Storytelling. I want to remind you all that these discussions are for you. As you listen to this and watch it today, if you have ideas yourself that you'd like to bring us for future live streams, please just reach out to me. I'm Rick at BrandStorytelling.tv and would love to hear from you. You know, on June 1st, I read a piece that Edward Cotton authored titled, "Dear White People in Advertising," and it gave me a lot to ponder and reflect upon. The first paragraph grabbed my attention, and I'd like to just read it to you right now. 4 years ago, in 2016, the Black Lives Matter movement was thrust into the cultural conversation. It offered an opportunity to have a much needed and overdue conversation. That conversation happened and went away. Diversity officers were hired, conferences were held, and actions were promised. But most of this was token BS. Real change never happened. And now we look stupid, dumb, and complicit. That article's titled, "Dear White People in Advertising." For the past 30 plus years, I've enjoyed a career in the advertising, marketing, and media world. And I realize today that I have been a benefactor of privilege that I didn't ask for, but was just provided to me due to the color of my skin. And that's just not fair. Things must change. Talk is cheap. Action is required. And that is what this discussion will focus on today. So I'd like to welcome Edward Cotton to the screen to introduce our guest today and look forward to this discussion. Thanks, Edward. It's all yours.
Thanks, Rick. Thanks for inviting me. I'm not going to waste any time. I want to get straight in and introduce our panelists. Hopefully the technology works, and as I announce them, they will appear magically on the screen and give us a little bit of a 30-second intro to who they are. So, Katherine, you're going to magically appear?
I'm working on it.
She is.
Okay, hi, how are you? Yes.
Hey. Do you want to give everyone a quick 30 seconds intro to who you are, what you do?
Sure, absolutely.
Thank you.
So my name is Katherine. First of all, thank you so much for having me. I feel this is the beginning of a very important conversation, and one which I hope will lead to fruitful results over time, and certainly the time has come. My name is Katherine Henry. I am founder of Palpable Media. We are an emerging tech consultancy, and we develop branded experiences and immersive training. You know, I'm really excited to be here because I've worked on the ground in 4 continents and have led international teams. But returning to the US in 2015, I experienced this latte effect where we've had a huge diversity between those at the very bottom of, of color getting increasingly whiter as we went up, from everyone from the guards and receptionists and admin, and then of course to a lily white advertising and media entity. And it's been really shocking and disturbing to see. And so I feel that the longer that's perpetuated, the more that becomes accepted as the norm. But we've reached this really exciting time when those norms are being challenged, and they're not just being addressed by the Black community, but by the global community. And so while this is deeply troubling and a difficult era for everyone, I'm nevertheless truly excited by the potential of what can happen from conversations like these. So thank you so much for bringing me to this forum to join you today.
Thank you, Katherine. Marla, are you going to magically appear?
I'm going to try. Hi everyone. Thank you for including me in this conversation. I have been a member of the agency community for over 30 years, and I've spent the last 3 years as president and CEO of the 4As. And one of the aspects that I am so proud to be part of the 4As is the work that we do on behalf of our foundation. And that includes the work to try and drive greater diversity across agencies through our multicultural advertising intern program, MAPE, through scholarships, through high schools. And what is very clear to us is that we haven't done enough work on the equity and inclusion side. And that's something that we've really been trying to address. And this is an opportunity, and I've been asked why now? And I've been pondering that on a regular basis, but I do think that we need to stop saying why and move that to how and move to action. And I'm energized by how many people want to be part of the solution and to stop talking and move it forward. So I'm hoping we're going to have a really interesting conversation and help people understand what actions they need to take.
Thank you, Marla. Donnovan, can you magically appear?
And here I am.
Thank you.
Thank
Do you
you.
want to take 30 seconds?
Yeah, less than that. I think thanks so much for the time and considering me and Overture to be represented in this conversation. You know, so my background is, so I started in the agency media world. Then I left and started my own agency, and our clients were American Express, Coca-Cola, ESPN, Financial Times, Sony Music, and others. I'm now the CEO and founder of Overture Global, which is a media company positioned as the younger, cooler version of The Economist. And we produce events in New York and in London, and we create video content and editorial content that covers global macro events taking place around the world.
Thank you. Jabari.
Yes, thanks for having me. Excited to be here and excited to be on the panel with such amazing other panelists. My name is Jabari Hearn. I spent 10 years in the advertising world, places like Wieden & Kennedy, Chiat Day, so on and so forth. I spent 10 years at Nike on the marketing brand side, and now I've spent 3 years on the tech side of things here in Silicon Valley, currently serving as Vice President of Brand for Lyft, and been waiting for this conversation for a very long time, so really excited to be a part of it.
Well, thank you all for joining, and I'm looking forward to this conversation. And as Rick said at the beginning, if you've got questions and you're listening in, please type them in the appropriate spot, and we'll address them. So my first question to the panel, and I'm going to go and ask Donnovan this. What are you thinking about on this moment in time, like what we're going through, what we've been through for the last couple of weeks, and why you believe it might be different, and why you're hoping it might be different?
Yeah, sure. You know, I look at this and I think this moment is definitely different because we're talking about it. And we're talking about it across industries and at levels and in corridors where it was previously ignored. Right, so just look at Gone with the Wind was pulled from streaming, Cops was canceled, the Confederate flag was ordered to be removed by the Navy, and that was just the last 24 hours. We've never seen this before. And beyond that is now part of a global conversation that is galvanizing Black and brown people all around the world, right? So people of darker complexions have always meant to feel and exist as second-class citizens, not only in the US, but all over the world. So if you look and you see the Australian Aboriginal community have adopted the Black Lives Matter movement because they know what it's like to have your culture adored and given access, but not your bodies, your children, or your mind. And last week we see that we had the statue of the mayor of Philadelphia that was removed, and we saw the slave trader in the United Kingdom that was removed. So now we're having conversations of Robert E. Lee's statue being removed. So yes, it's different. And so we're experiencing something that we've never had before because it's part of the everyday zeitgeist. And it's not just Black people, it's everyone that's having a conversation about this, and everyone is weighing in on what inclusion should and equity should look like.
Thank you. Jabari, do you want to share your thoughts on what you've experienced and what you're seeing?
Sure. I'm really excited about the action that's taking place and the allyship that's taking place. I feel like Black people have been talking about this for a long time. This conversation around diversity and marketing and advertising is not new. And we've been talking about it in a few different agencies that popped up, a few different support systems have popped up, but now we are trying to do something about it. You know, I think the first part is recognizing you have a problem, but we can't sit in that phase for too long. We have to now move to action, and we can't do it alone either. And so what I'm excited about, and when I talk to my parents and some of the older people in my network, they're excited about not just seeing white people out there, Black people out fighting for our rights, but like was just talked about before, all over the world, all different shades, all different levels of the are part of this conversation. And I'm already starting to see people biased toward action, which is the most important part. Because I really believe that people do what you inspect, not what you expect. And so if we can start to see people's actions and hold them accountable, then we'll see real change.
Katherine? Are you there? Disappeared? You're here, but you're on mute.
He's on mute.
I am. Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
sorry. So, I take off my glasses, I can't see a thing. I wanted to go back to your question. I think how is it different? And my first question is, what do you mean by that? Because there are a couple of ways of approaching that. So I'm going to turn that back to you and why you formulated it so that way. What was your thinking?
Well, my thinking was 2015, 2016, we started to have a conversation, and you know, it sort of rippled around, and people made some noises. But you know, we've seen, I think the examples that have been mentioned already are fairly unprecedented. We've seen 450 million donated by corporate America in 7 days. Not that this is what we're exactly asking for, because there's more needed, but it seems like this moment, the George Floyd murder has been a catalytic event, and I'm just want to get your take on the event and what you're seeing around you. You may want to challenge and say it isn't different. That's what the point.
Okay, so I do actually. I do want to address something, and then I do have a challenge in mind, because the first reaction is, of course, I know why Black people are marching. I mean, there's no surprise there. We have been doing this for quite some time. But the question is, what about white people? Why are they out? And we do have to ask why. I mean, obviously, over the past several decades, we have seen multiple economic recessions. And, you know, in this current one, we've just seen 40 million jobs lost, 40% of which will not be replaced. And so we're talking about some 16 million unemployed, and you know, that's 2 times the Great Depression era. So, you know, Blacks will disproportionately from that, but increasingly so too do whites, and the loss of economic stability and the increase in contract work. So all of these things come to mind to say, hey, listen, we're looking at a much bigger structural problem that has to be addressed, and clearly brands that do not acknowledge this are going to be in trouble, and they already are in trouble. And this is not a revolution that can be addressed by, you know, with a Pepsi. I would, however, like to raise a question back to Marla and say, you know, we really do actually have to examine why there hasn't been activity by white people before. And one of you raised, I think, Edward, I don't know if it was you or someone else on the panel, said, I watched this happen years ago and did nothing. I was annoyed and wanted it to be over. Well, none of us wants this to happen. So we have to examine what the participation is, what the motivation is of allies, because the success of this outcome depends on the conviction and the commitment of our allies.
Thank you. Marla.
Hi. Sorry, my computer crashed.
Okay, so a couple of questions here. What are your thoughts on what we're experiencing right now? And why is it different to what we might have seen? And then Katherine just interjected an additional really difficult question, which is, why do you think nothing has been done, or the actions have been limited? So you might handle those in any particular order.
Well, yeah, more or less.
So,
I think what I'm saying that the question is more, why now, and why is this an issue now when the issue has persisted for some time? I think we need to examine that, because the level of commitment, there's a certain, I would say, disbelief that now that the commitment is real. And so, you know, people like me are reluctant almost to speak up, because we're thinking this could backlash. How do we know that these allies are true and in it for the long haul? And is this commitment sincere?
Yeah,
I'm glad you're asking the question, because I've been asking it, and I've spoken with colleagues of mine who have come forth and said, well, why now, Marla? Like, what has changed? What is different? And I don't think I have all the answers, but what I've been able to try and unpack is I don't think people truly understood Black Lives Matter a few years ago. I think that they didn't take the time to listen, to learn, and understand. I do believe that the past few months being quarantined and on a global scale has created somewhat of a fragility, but a true understanding of humanity and connection. I think that's a part of it. So I think people are feeling vulnerable and they're willing to start to look at things a little bit differently. And there already was conversation around COVID, how it was disproportionately impacting people of color and why was that happening. And we needed to understand that because this is something that people are trying to understand. They've lost control. They're digging deeper. I also think another shift that has happened is that you are seeing the horrific murders of these people, and it's enough already. And it's so real and raw. And what I am realizing is how incredibly painful it is for people. And for me personally, recognizing that COVID is disproportionately impacting people of color and the Black community specifically in terms of how it's affecting, I've had conversations with Black colleagues about trying to show up as their true selves to work and what that looks like every day. And you look at health statistics and I realize, no wonder blood pressure is higher, hypertension, the stress of every day having to show up and have a facade on, or to worry about who is your ally and who is not, and what you have to do, and what may happen on your journey to and from work while you're there. Enough already. And I'm thrilled that people are standing up. But I also know that I've also been a CEO where I haven't taken enough action in the past. And when Black Lives Matter came about, I was fortunate that I had employees who were comfortable coming to me and saying, Marla, I can't get in the elevator and have people pretend this isn't happening. I need you to do something. And I need you not to just say something. I need this to be more action oriented. I need you to help us. And we made some shifts there, but it wasn't enough. Saying that we needed to have a diverse slate for senior leadership positions wasn't enough. It needed to be every position. And so now in my role as the 4As, as the leader of the agency community, we have an opportunity, and we are working on this, to not just sit back and ask, but to tell agencies, you must do this. This is how you move it forward. We heard from over 600 Black professionals, colleagues in our community yesterday, speaking out, and I applaud them because they finally feel like they have a voice and they can come together to do that, but we have to listen. And we put out a message last week, and we are going to follow it up this week with actions, and we're going to continue to follow it up, but we're going to start holding people accountable. And that message is very simple. It's about hiring Black people, hearing Black people, promoting Black people, and making sure that advertising is for everyone. And we are putting together substantive actions behind that. And we have to make this time different, but accountability is key. And we've talked about pledges. I don't think that pledges work. You can sign any document. If there isn't some sort of metric built into it and accountability to make sure people are doing what they say they're going to do, it's meaningless. So those are some of my thoughts.
Yeah.
Can I jump in on that too?
Please, yeah.
Because I think that I honestly had this debate recently about the why, and are people sincere now? And the conclusion of that debate was, who cares? If someone is giving $450 million to the effort, I could care less what their motivation was, because the movement does need money. The chairman of the NFL, Roger Goodell, spoke out again as it relates to the NFL, and people are asking why now? What changed your mind? And my answer is, I don't care. If their policies are changing, if Colin Kaepernick is going to get a job now, I could care less what changed his mind, because we keep trying to find what are those things that are going to change people's minds. We did research to say the diversity, a more diverse team adds more revenue, right? It's a business decision, right? So if you can get down to people's business and we still didn't make change, then we know there's a big problem. And so honestly, I care more about changing people's behaviors right now that are affecting and specifically killing Black people and Black culture versus, you know, their motivations behind it.
Can I chime in on that as well?
Yeah, please, yeah.
Yeah, so the question I have for you, Marla, around that is, you know, through your own admission, you said that as a CEO, you didn't do a good job in being able to bring diversity to your organization. So the question is, and you didn't, and we clearly didn't see that in the last few years of the 4As and in the industry now, right? So the question is, like, why should this be something that we look at and say, we trust you to do that now?
I don't know that you can unless we put the actions forward. You're right. You have to wait and see what are the actions that we are putting forward and how are we holding agencies accountable to delivering against that. And that is not going to just be around what the 4A says, but it has to be about people within every agency having that commitment and being held accountable from their leadership, from the top down. And it's a fair point because you've heard it before and it needs to be different.
We've heard it many times before. We've heard it many times.
We have, and I think Jabari mentioned earlier, listen.
I just cut out.
I have a quick question. What does accountability look like?
Can you hear me?
Oh, there we go. You got it in there.
I think accountability is about a real set of actions that are tracking. And we saw yesterday from the agency community, the Black professionals asking for 12 different actions to take place. And we applaud those. And we actually are taking those and embracing them and saying, here are specific actions around what those need to look like. Here are resources you need to tap into. But one of the requests they had was, let's measure and track what is happening and let's be public about it. And that is something that the 4As has done in the past, and we need to revisit that. And we are happy to collect that data, but that data can't just be to collect, has to be to actually use and make decisions on and move it forward. And that's one action. Were you going to say something, Donnovan?
Yeah, correct me if I'm wrong. Was that initiative in terms of gathering consensus from the 600 Black executives, was that led by the 4As or was that not?
It was independently led. It was led by 2 individuals.
Yeah, that was my point. So what I'm trying to get to is, like, you know, Black people have been in the industry for a long time. Like, why did it take, you know, for 600 individuals to come together to create this, as opposed to this being led by the 4As or by one of our governing bodies?
Well, we were starting to lead it last week in terms of identifying what are actions that need to be taken. We've been working on what those specific actions should be. And a lot of what was recommended were recommendations that we were going to follow through on. And it's fair to say, why did we need them to take action and why aren't we moving forward? And I accept that.
I think that,
You know, we saw a study in 2017. We saw a study in 2017 by the ANA, and we know that, you know, that didn't really get very far. This is not the first time that we've seen, you know, a commitment, if you will, made in the sand. Let's see whether or not it has legs. I think that there's an opportunity for allyship, and I'll get to that later. But in the immediate terms, you know, my space is in technology and branded experiences, and so I'm looking at the technology side, and I know that, you know, minority markets have $4 trillion of capital at their disposal in terms of buying power, and we're looking at 43% of millennials count themselves as ethnic minorities, and they're all thirsting for a change, but they're also holding brands accountable, and they're holding them publicly accountable on all sorts of social media platforms. We talked before offline about the fact that people are creating spreadsheets. I personally wouldn't be surprised if there's an app. You know, it might be an app on your phone and eventually an augmented reality app that'll let you know which brands are effectively your partners. So this is turning into real action. I mean, on the one, and mistakes will be costly. So, you know, while we know that there's a business case to diversity, and we've cited the McKinsey Harvard Business multiple studies, now is the time to walk the talk, because people will be watching, and those actions will be held accountable by the court of public opinion.
Can I throw it across to Jabari, because he's in the privileged position of working inside brand. So you can make some impact inside your organization, but also with your agencies in terms of what you're asking from them. Has this been something you've been thinking about this week?
This is something I've been thinking about since I've been Black and a leader.
No, but at
as soon
Lyft.
as I left,
I know you've been thinking about it for a long time, but at Lyft, in the context of Lyft.
no, this is as soon as I became a leader and left the advertising world, for every one of the agencies that I interact with, I only see maybe one Black person in the room around the table when we do pitches or creative sessions. And I ask every one of them, of my partners, what are you doing right now on this front? And where I've failed, and when I talk about accountability, and this is what the point I was trying to get to, is yes, we can measure it, which is going to be awesome. But what happens when we don't hit our benchmarks? That's what I mean by accountability. When you don't hit the numbers that you laid out, because there have been these benchmarks in agencies for a long time and in companies for a long time. But what happens when you don't hit it? What happens when inside the company you have bias trainings, but people don't take it? Nothing happens is the answer. And so what I want is accountability there, not just to measure it, but to hold people to the fire. That if you don't go through your bias training, if you don't hit your numbers, if your company and agency does not look like the city in which it lives in, then you get zero business. You cannot operate. Your system should shut down. That's what I'm looking for.
So just let's have other people's thoughts on. So your accountability. When you say your system should shut down, what is it?
There are things you have to run a business in any state. You have to get a license. You have to you have to follow certain rules. You have to be ADA compliant, right? So why isn't it, in order to run a business, you have to hit these certain things? Otherwise, you cannot operate your business.
Right, but until we get to sort of some point, is the best way to do that to link to compensation? To say, if you don't hit these targets?
Yes, I believe that compensation is a big deal. Because the same with agencies. I'm working with agencies and I call them out. Hey, I want to see more diversity in your room. They say, yeah, you know, we're working on that.
Yeah, that's
and then here it is now a year later, they're still working on it, but I'm still giving them my money. And so that's more on me than it is on them. Because I'm actually.
Would you consider changing your contract with your agencies to incentivize them to bring diverse teams to you?
Exactly.
In the same way that you would incentivize them, Jabari, we're telling them that they need to also incentivize their people to drive that change and to ensure that accountability. There are some agencies that do that now, but that needs to be universal.
It does.
Any other thoughts on what real accountability looks like from the rest of you?
Well, you talked about bias training, and I know there's a lot of mixed feelings about bias training. And we actually had put together a pretty comprehensive program 2 years ago called Workplace Enlightenment, and we brought in Glenn Singleton to lead courageous conversations. We brought in people like Natasha Bowman to talk about class and privilege, and we were trying to move that along and kind of hit some road bumps and had to revamp it because it came down to cost, and it shouldn't come down to cost. This has to be an investment that everyone recognizes is critical. And one of the elements of that program, and at the time, Keisha Jean-Baptiste was the lead behind it. And she was very vocal about the need for this to happen with senior leadership and HR specifically. And I would say one of the challenges now is that bias training isn't necessarily mandated across the board. It might be for more, call it mid-level, but it isn't always mandated at the most senior levels, and I think that is critical.
You know, it's interesting, you talk about training, and what I've noticed is a certain trend in training. The focus has primarily been on, because we do immersive training with virtual reality, and because we feel that, and studies have shown that it has much longer lasting impact on people over time and is much more effective because people get to experience firsthand what that bias looks like. But increasingly, you know, we've done very little on the multicultural or diversity space, because the shift in recent years has been on women in, you know, as the diversity. And so one of the things as a woman in business that I find very difficult, I'm a member of She Runs at the Ad Club, the ANA, I mean, you name it. And invariably the question always comes up, oh, well, we need more women, as opposed to talking about ethnic diversity. And so I would love to see a shift really now to say, okay, that's a separate issue, and they need to be treated separately, because, you know, everything from representation in media to this, it seems like it's all been eclipsed by the Me Too movement, and I'd like to see this come back on center stage.
Well, I know when the Me Too movement happened, there were a lot of questions about why not address intersectionality and why are you just isolating gender as a variable?
I feel it was a lot more convenient for a lot of people to focus on that because it tended to be driven, first of all, by women, because there's so many women in HR and PR and IR, and on the other hand, and so they stood to be the most immediate beneficiaries. And it's a lot easier because you're probably, you know, for the most part, you're promoting more white women to senior levels. And I think that, you know, we need to have this harder conversation and about, you know, creating opportunities. But again, the business place is clear. And so setting, you know, hardcore standards and KPIs as we would for any business is only a good thing.
Can I ask you guys, Marla talked about pushing for actions and she sort of mentioned a few thoughts and we talked about accountability. What are your expectations? I mean, what looks different to you in terms of how this opportunity, if we call it opportunity, comes to market? You know, in terms of if we were back in a year's time, what do you guys want to see? What would you like to see happen? You know, concrete. I'd like to see the heads of, you know, I'd like to see 25% of agencies have Black leaders on their boards. What do you think what do you think looks like progress? What is progress?
I can start with one bullet and then we can build on. One thing that I think we have to be careful of is what we're starting with. We're going to make sure our next set of interns is the most diverse group ever to come into our company. And I feel like we are starting at the bottom because that's maybe where the fish are and sort of the easy way to find Black talent. I think we need to actually not start at the bottom of the talent pool, but actually start at the more senior level of the talent pool. Because what I've learned is when you start at a more junior level, it's a leaky bucket strategy. So they'll come into your organization and they'll see that they cannot become a leader or do not have a path, do not have a mentor, do not have a sponsor, and then they leave and find a place that does. And so I worry that we're starting the conversation with let's start going to historically Black colleges and let's hire more interns, which we should do. But we can't do that without making sure that we're addressing the mid and senior level roles.
Great.
Yeah, and on my end, I look at it, you know, similar to Jabari. I think that, you know, these are not complex businesses. So there are executives that have extreme skills, right, that have been proven across other industries that can be brought in to provide us with the expertise and the ability to grow, to retain clients, grow opportunities in terms, especially around cultivating a new workforce and bringing a level of mentorship that doesn't exist in our industry, that exists in finance, right? Wall Street has really great structures in terms of training programs and mentorship and internship programs. So we need to bring some of those best practices into this industry because we've lagged, right? Wall Street was an industry that did not have a high level of diversity throughout the 80s, and they completely lacked us.
They still don't.
Right, but I think they've done better than us, right? I think most of all, you look around some of the big investment banks, they've had Black CEOs for many, many years, and I don't think we can say the same at the same level within the advertising and media world, right? So I think we need to bringing in talent from all around other industries to help us to.
Can I just add the point there that this isn't a point that has been made to me in the past week is. This is an industry in flux. Yeah. Now, when you look at that clutter reel of all the COVID commercials that look the same, there is a need for talent. There is a need for what this diverse talent can bring to the table. We know the power of Black culture in pop culture. Surely not just the diverse team story, but there's a massive contribution that Black people can make to the industry in terms of making it better, making it smarter, making it more culturally impactful, and it's about an industry that really needs an injection of innovation and an injection of ideas. And this is a real opportunity to do that beyond in quotas and numbers, but there's a cultural need and a creative need.
I think there is. I think there's also there's agencies out there that are minority-owned agencies that are looking to be, supplement agency work and company work. I'm on the board of the Marcus Graham Project, which has been around for a while now.
Yeah.
And struggles to get funding. It struggles to place talented, qualified Black professionals.
Can you explain to everyone what the Marcus Graham Project is? Because I think a lot of people would be, some of us know, but not everyone does.
Yes, the Marcus Graham Project has been around over a decade now. It is a nonprofit that focuses on developing and placing people of color in the advertising and marketing world. And so they've done project work for companies over the summer, but are now expanding that offering. But they've been around for a while and really struggled just to get funded, and people are asking, where are talented, qualified Black people? And they're not hard to find, even with a simple Google search or a question. Yeah. But yet, we still use that as an excuse. And so even if we don't have roles to hire for, we have a project work to get done. And that's another way to sort of invest money into this movement.
Yeah, and I agree. I look at this, I think what we have to do is, and I think we're getting closer to it, but I'm not sure if we're having these conversations at the executive levels of the agencies, at the holding companies, right? So I think like at anything of this magnitude, first thing that needs to be done is we have to make a recognition that wrong was done, and that wrong was the exclusion of Black people, right? So everything that we know, everything that is digital, everything that is online is a relatively new industry, but somehow we brought in the foolery of old industries into this one, right? Meaning we brought all of the opportunities to white folks and versus people of color, right? But you look around, there's no reason why less than 2% of venture-backed companies have a Black CEO founder. There's no reason why digital agencies less than 25 years old have all white management teams and all white boards, right? There's no reason for that. And just like there was no reason for Complex Media to raise $60 million, that was a platform completely based on Black lifestyle and Black culture, while the Black men that were out there doing it couldn't get a meeting with VCs if they tried. So when you think about that, like those are some of the things that we have to recognize that was wrong. And now we have to figure out what is right. Now, the right thing to do is actually make an effort to, like Jabari pointed out, to connect with more Black owners of companies and Black folks that will be able to provide a service, client services to an agency, right? Not only like support services, because I know what was going to happen. There's a whole bunch of, there would be a big run to juice up the numbers and doing a whole bunch of other stuff that are Black-owned firms, but Black-owned firms that are servicing the client. And that's where the opportunity lies. That's where a major holding company can work with a small boutique agency and change their fortunes and change their outcome and make them a potential partner for the long term or potential acquisition, giving equity, creating an equity increase for all those involved in changing wealth and income in the community. That's what we need to look at.
And those budgets need to be protected. Everyone got budgets cut during COVID, and guess where many of the budgets were cut? D&I programs, the ERG budgets, what they would call the low-hanging fruit, the things that actually helped to serve this very problem were the things that got cut, swept along with everything else. Those budgets need to be sacred and held, juiced up for one, but also protected.
Yeah, and and I think that those numbers need to be transparent. So the numbers in terms of like how much an agency or holding company is spending on Black-owned media. And I'm not just saying Black-owned media in terms of Black-owned that's targeting Black people. There are plenty of amazing Black entrepreneurs that are doing amazing stuff that work just for the general audience, but that's a whole different conversation. But I think that the agencies and holding companies have to be specific in terms of working with those organizations, right? And delivering those numbers on an annual basis, as well as hiring. So we need to be able to see what's the target in terms of being able to bring in folks of different backgrounds into an agency, into a holding company, and then show that every single year. right? That needs to be a part of it. And I don't think right now it's something that's on the radar of ESG investors, so the portfolio managers and private equity guys. But I think in the next few years, you're going to start to see portfolio managers at venture funds, at different investment funds tracking the metrics around diversity and how they're supporting the Black and diverse communities.
Yeah, sorry, I've got sirens in the background. So
New
can we
Yorker.
go back? Can we go back to retention? It's an immediate thing you can do now, right? What should this, if there's talented Black employees at agencies who are wondering what's going on, you don't want them walking out right now. So what's your advice to leaders in terms of the actions they should be taking to retain their talent at this moment in time? Obviously, they need leadership. Obviously, they need role models. That's not going to happen in the next week. So what would you say these leaders should be doing to retain their talent, to stop them getting dispirited and bored and hang in there? What would you advise them to do?
I think it has to come from the top down. I think it has to come from the top downs. For so long, what we've seen around a lot of these conversations is we have certain individuals that are tasked with, D&I responsibilities at the agency level, and I think that's great and that's fine. We need those folks doing that because there's a lot of work on the ground every single day. But I think you need to see the folks, the leaders from the holding company saying that this is important to me and this is the future of our business. And we want you to stay and stick with us because we're going to build a plan. And we also need to see it from the brands. Brands need to make very specific mandates in terms of how they want their teams to look and how they want their agencies to be run. That's it. That's who's going to make the big difference. Because at the end of the day, that's who pays the bills, right? And if the brands are reaching out to the agencies demanding a certain level of diversity and a certain level of inclusion, and at the same time playing a very specific role in communicating with the folks on their agency side, that's when things change. That's when behavior shifts. Anything else is going to put us in a position where we're right back here a year, 2 years from now.
Can I take Donovan's point and throw it to Marla? Marla, are you still here?
I'm here.
What's the chance of this? How high can this go? Donovan's point is it needs to go right to the very top. It needs to come from the top. It needs to come from the leaders of the holding companies and be projected downwards versus stuck in middle management as a middle management, senior management initiative.
I totally agree. It has to come from the top. And I've been in contact with those leaders and they are committed to making change and making sure that they take action. I think that is critical, but it's not up to a D&I lead. It's not up to an HR person to be driving this change. It's from the top, and it also takes investment, as you said. And those are budgets that need to be sacred and protected if you really are truly committed to that. And again, it's an investment. It's not a cost. It's about your principles, is about what you are doing for your people. And I always say agencies are about people, product, and clients, and it has to start with your people. It absolutely does. And so what's your commitment to them? I think Donovan's point about getting the brands to hold the agencies accountable, we've seen some do that. Verizon, HP, General Mills, it's starting to show up more. That should be both sides, right? That should be on the brand side and the agency side. They should be holding each other accountable for driving the kind of diversity and the inclusion, because there need to be senior people too. I also think your point about bringing people in from other industries is something that should really be looked at more seriously and hasn't been. There's a lot of agency businesses different and kind of an up or out, and I think there's got to be more openness. So does it start from the top? Absolutely.
Yeah, look, think about it. If you remove the D&I person from this count, how many agency holding companies have Black people at the executive rank? That's a question.
And so to that point, though, why does it have to be at the executive rank? I think we have the opportunity to go back to your retention question is to bring more Black people, give them a seat at the table. And I don't believe they have to be your executive leadership team to do that. There are leaders in these organizations that are Black, and they
I agree. I think it has to be top. I think it has to be at all levels. I completely agree, because once you have leadership at all levels, it allows for more networks to be used to bring in more talent and for people to stay, right? Like when you are a junior person and you look up, or a mid-level person and you look up and you see someone that looks like you, you look at your career and you say, I could be in that role at some point. But if they're not, then why would you stay?
But like, for example, why can't we have a 21-year-old Black leader on a board? I'm being dead serious.
It can happen.
Did they have certain, a certain thing? Did they not bring a certain, context to the conversation that might be useful?
I agree.
A seat at the table, and to feel heard and feel a part of the team. That is what's going to retain talent. So find a way to do that.
Jabari and Donnovan, I actually came up with a concept, and we're actually, my team and I are looking at formalizing the concept of allyship, because I was thinking about all of these things, internally and externally, and mapping it out and trying to understand how all of these things could come together, but in a way that is a concerted effort that moves us towards specific goals. And so we're looking in the early stages of developing what we call ally boards, which are effectively made of successful, highly influential Black and Latino business owners. And when I say business owners, I'm not talking about small businesses, mom and pop shops on the corner. I'm talking about, highly successful, influential Black leaders in law, in law firms, technology, marketing, and ad agencies, all these companies that come to bear and that influence on, branding, advertising, and marketing. And they would be your, go-to resource it's effectively like a parallel board, and that would allow you to help, set the goals. If you need new talent, they could direct you toward the new talent. They could be your next board members or your acquisitions. So this way you start to grow together, and it's win-win for everyone. So that's something that I think that we could look at as a way forward, rather than just to sort of have people say scattershot money around to different organizations, many of which, by the way, are like Equal Justice Initiative, which is wonderful, but it's not necessarily focused towards the industry specifically, and it's not helping that growth pattern. So I think that something like these ally boards and an allyship that helps bring us, harness that power and work in the same direction, that could be a tremendous way of going forward.
Yeah, and I think anything is better than we got now, so let's give it a shot, right? But I think that when you look at, Marla most recently,
we've started.
Marla most recently announced a whole new crop of board members, and the 4A's board is not as diverse as I would like it to be, right?
It's not as diverse as I would like it to be either, and there's more work that absolutely needs to be done there.
Yeah, a lot more. And I think that, there is, obviously there's certain levels of seniority that you need to have around the table. I get that. But I think you can start with having observers, right? So I think you can start with having folks to just come be as observers. They get a great title, they get the exposure, and that helps to keep them in the seat, right? As opposed to going to another industry, right? So it helps with retention of great talent. So I think we can start to look at stuff like that, because it's there. Like what we're doing, what we have been doing hasn't really worked, right? When we look at what we have now, it's not been successful. It practically failed the previous generation. I think it's failing our generation, but we can't let this go on. We can't let it fail the generation to come.
And I agree. Allyship circle, especially of younger people, because if you think about all the change that's happening, all the people that are out protesting, it's young people. They're the ones making the change, but yet all of us are going to sit up in a room and figure out how we're going to fix it, but not include them in the conversation. That to me makes zero sense. Right. So, there are young people, Black people in these agencies currently that are actually making demands, and you're listening to them. So why wait until there's a crisis to listen to them to make demands? Why not make them a part of the conversation now? You got to have it. We weren't given certain credentials to be a part of the conversation. So, we're never going to make it to the credentials you need in order to get to the board or sit around the table of executive table and make these decisions. Yeah. And you guys are making them alone. That's a problem. So you can start that tomorrow. You don't need any special permission or any extra money. Bring those people to the table.
Yeah.
Sorry, we're kind of running close to time. So we could have had another hour on this. We should have had another hour. But We don't. So my last question.
Well, can I say one thing on that? I think we talked a lot about accountability, so we need to kind of revisit this conversation and see if things really have changed in 6 months, 9 months, 12 months.
Yeah. I did.
And Marla, I would say hold us accountable too, meaning that we're saying all this to you. If you need something, we're here.
Thank
Like,
you. No, I genuinely mean that. That is very important.
Well,
one of the things that I
Well,
don't like hearing at all, and I think I speak for most Black people, we don't like hearing, well, we can't find the talent.
I hate that too, because it's not true.
You reach out to any one of us, we can find that talent for you.
Yeah,
Great.
as a matter of fact,
I'll tell you right now, I'm looking for a VP marketing director.
I'll have.
All right. Well, actually, I had the. We'll all know it. Trust you. You'll get lots of things. I had the New York City Tech Creatives. It's one of the largest creative technology groups in the country. It's some 3,000 members, and we created a creative resource for them. It's basically a job board in response to the pandemic. And again, as we put together this board of these ally boards, it would be great if the members here on this panel could join us as we start putting those together and becoming ourselves resources to help help companies navigate out of this crisis. So I think this is a great initiative happening right here.
Can I just close out with asking you guys one question? That question is, people listening in, what one thing should they take away from this that they can do themselves, maybe starting tomorrow?
Sure. Who wants to go first?
I can go.
Yeah.
I've been telling people that it's a process and it's fairly high level, but bear with me. I think it starts with opening your eyes, because I think opening your eyes leads to understanding. There's a lot of people saying, I didn't know that what was going on. Open your eyes. It leads to understanding. Then I believe that open your hearts, because then that leads to empathy. Now that you understand, you can feel it, right? And I believe once you've opened your hearts, and then you can open a dialogue, which leads to conversation and action. And so to me, it's a step that these are steps that you have to get through before you can actually get to action. And I think people are jumping to action without understanding the real problem and having empathy for the people that you're trying to support.
Yeah. What I'd like to say is, is that we need action, and we need solutions, and we need real plans around this. Not now, but right now, right? In 1967, at Riverside Church, Dr. King spoke of the fierce urgency of now, and that's where we are. The mission may look a little different, but we're not that far off. We're still in a position where Black people have been excluded from opportunities for way too long, and it's created a crisis, right? When you look at the median net worth of the average white household, it's 10 times higher than a Black household, 10 times. So in the next few weeks and months, as we start to rebuild an economy coming out of COVID, coming off of historical lows and created a wave of unemployment that we've never experienced in this country, not for a long time anyway. If we don't start to build a plan and a framework that includes Black people in this redevelopment plan, we're going to see the increase in the gap between Black and white people in regards to net worth, healthcare, education, and every other vital data stat point around where it's going to be practically impossible to reverse. It will be very, very, very impossible to turn that around. So when we're talking about the solution, we have to stick to the constructs that we know that work, and that's transparency, accountability, and capitalism.
Thank you. Katherine?
I think the concept of empathy is a very important one. We cannot go forward without recognizing the pain and anguish of people who are going through prolonged periods of unemployment. As I said, with some 16 million people who are going to remain unemployed for some time, it's going to be a very, very difficult period. And most of those people will be Black and brown people. So to the extent wherever you can, try to help and try to make sure that they get employed and not just defer to the first white person, because even if they might have a slight advantage, the advantage of this person who's really willing to step up and work even harder to prove their worth will be worthwhile in the long run. I mean, look around to your friends and family who are themselves maybe have lost jobs. Can you imagine having to go through that multiple times in your life? I think that's one way of putting things in perspective. And the other thing is to then set KPIs. I'm a big fan of putting a stake in the ground and moving towards it. I mean, all these successful businesses, none of those move forward without having KPIs. So set them and make sure that your team buys in, and then check in and make sure that everybody's working towards that goal, not to let it get swept under the carpet, not to let the, you know, give the burden to Black people in the room, but take up the burden yourself, because in the end, it's win-win for everyone.
I think those are all excellent actions that people need to take. And I just believe it starts with you as an individual. And I think your point, Jabari, about it's about your eyes and it's about understanding, it's about empathy, but you have to kind of look at what your role is, regardless of whether you're junior or very senior. But if you are very senior, you have power and you have to use that in a different way, and you have to speak up, and you can't just sit back anymore, and you have to own your privilege, but you have to own your responsibility to support and to advance and to recognize what's happening in our country right now. And you need to say no more about like why now, but how do we just not continue to have this conversation and that we eliminate it and move it forward.
Thank you. Thank you all for an amazing conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Edward.
Thanks for allowing it, for bringing it up.
Thank you.
If you'd all just stick around for 1 second, I've got a couple of closing comments. Thank you, first of all, for a great conversation. Know that this is being recorded. It'll be on the YouTube channel tomorrow. So those of you who are listening and watching in, please share it widely. There's a lot of great information here that needs to be shared. You know, I learned a few things here. I was, you know, the question of why now? Well, it may just be that advertising works. We all know the phrase reach and frequency. Well, we've been hit over the head with this for a long time, and maybe now it's sinking in. So maybe that reach and frequency thing really does work. But more importantly is, you know, let's just move on. Whatever reason it is that now is the moment, and let's make things happen. And I got to say that now is not the time to be defensive. You know, I've taken ownership for my own complacency over the years. I've been 30 years in the media business. I've programmed lots and lots of conferences. Donovan's been to many of them, and he knows this. And I didn't do my job to be inclusive because nobody made me at the time. So I'm taking ownership, and I think that other media companies and trade associations need to do the same. Marla, I would ask you to look at the statement on the 4A's website right now that starts with, for decades, we've had a deep commitment to diversity and inclusion. I'd like you to, you know, everybody, you know, you need to think about that. I'm sure you have. And if you've had that deep commitment, what have you done about it and has it worked? It might not be the right message that people want to hear from the 4A's right now. I think people need to be honest with themselves and with their audiences. I think pledges can work. I think pledges can work if we all make our own pledges and then are transparent about what they are. And I've got a suggestion for all of our trade organizations, the 4A's, the ANA, the IAB, to look at the boards, to look at the leadership and consider what that makeup is. And if you want to see a change in that leadership, in that makeup, then make a pledge to it. And, you know, so my idea is this, and I'd love to hear some, you know, all of you, you know, afterwards, that if we went just to our trade associations and the media companies that serve the advertising industry, Ad Age and Adweek and Media Post and DigiDay and others, and ask them all to make similar pledges. When you consider that the associations and the media companies, our trade publications, are the ones who filter the voice in our conferences, in the trades that we read, they're the filter. And if those filters aren't well represented and diverse, then we're not serving the industry well. So I would ask all of them. I started with Nick Fries this week, and Nick's like, absolutely, I'm dedicated to change. Well, pledge that change, and then take your pledge to a diverse group of people and have them vet that for you. Is this enough? Is this what I should be doing? And then publicize it, be transparent about it, and open yourself up to an audit a year from now and let people see where you've progressed. That's a suggestion I have. If we started with the publications, the media in our industry, and the trade organizations, if they took a good look at themselves, made the change they think necessary, and allow themselves to be held accountable, I think that would go a long frickin' way. And I encourage people to support that. So with that, please share, please be safe, please come back. I know we had an hour today. I'll make an hour available on our brand storytelling community live stream whenever you want. We're dedicated to helping and supporting diversity and inclusion and making real change. So thanks to everybody very much. It's much appreciated.
Thank you, Rick. Thank you, Ed.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.